to start with a little bit of a mystery box, literally. Box. That's not it. Anyway, so what is the most important car ever made? Well, if you have maybe a dream car that you might have today, maybe a Ferrari or Lamborghini, Porsche, Bugatti, um, uh, shoot, what's that other Italian one, Pagani. A lot of these cars have something very similar, especially all these supercars have something very similar in common. A lot of them have all-wheel drive systems. They have ABS. They have all these nanny programs. But there's a car that started all of this before, and it saved a little-known company at the time from bankruptcy. This is also my very first Porsche listed on the channel. Now, no, I'm not talking about this Porsche. That's not a car, silly. I'm talking about this Porsche. This Porsche is the Porsche 959, and it kind of helped save Porsche from bankruptcy by making it financially weaker. Never mind. This isn't supposed to make sense. This is going to be a little bit of a narrative. Um, uh, Shoot, what's the word? Essay. A little bit of a video essay as we go along. To start off, while we're unboxing, this is the Tamiya 1/24th scale 959. This is the card that Porsche famously sold in the late 80s for, at the time, well over $200,000, which is quite a lot of money from what I'm told. More money than I'll ever see in a year. But that's not important. What is important is that this car, at the time, Porsche was toying around with the idea of getting rid of its venerable and iconic 911. Now, the 911, excuse me, the 911 at the time was several decades old. It was not long in the tooth as necessarily, because there was a lot of Porsche enthusiasts and aficionados at the time that just absolutely loved the car. But it was a car that was designed that had its roots in the 1930s and 1940s, all the way back to Germany, and a people's car that you may or may not have heard of called the Volkswagen Bug. The Volkswagen Beetle was designed by Ferdinand Porsche, and the 911 shape is very reminiscent of the early Beetles. Now, why is this, you might ask? Well, it's not because it was just a really awesome design, but early Porsches used basically what they had lying around. That was Volkswagen parts. The only Volkswagen at the time was the Volkswagen Beetle. So here we got the glass, we've got the side, rear, and the windscreen, the funky headlights, as well as the long, wide taillight design. So this the 911, like I said, had its roots back in the 30s. Therefore, it wasn't, well, the 911, of course, came out in the 60s, but it was based on very similar design aesthetics, such as the flat six-cylinder engine, horizontally opposed, what they call a boxer engine. And it had, well, wasn't a very aerodynamic car at the time. We'll have the magnesium wheels, which I believe were a first on cars at the time. ABS, which was the first on super sports cars at the time, or exotic sports cars at the time. And because the 911 was so old, it was thought that it was a thing of the past, a relic, as you might think. And so Porsche was designing cars to replace it. In fact, most notably was the 928. Now, if you're out there saying, I'm sorry, a 928, what is that? Well, it was a front engine V8 Grand Touring Porsche, and it was thought to replace the 911 eventually. Well, If you go to a Porsche dealership, you'll see 911s for sale today with a very basic shape that they have had for several decades, but you won't see a 928. The the closest comparison you might find in a modern showroom of a Porsche dealership is either going to be the Panamera, the four-door front engine V8, or the Taycan, which is a very similar formula to the 928, and also a very forward-looking vehicle, being all electric. Also an expensive car. So here we have the, in my opinion, beautiful. I know not everybody thinks it's beautiful, but it definitely was a very futuristic, very forward-thinking 911 at the time with the basic 911 silhouette. It also was one of the first cars to incorporate, excuse me, the first production car to incorporate carbon Kevlar. Um, can't think of the words right now. Carbon fiber, like I said before, magnesium rims, anti-lock braking system, all-wheel drive. If you think of modern sports cars today, a lot of them will feature all these things, including all-wheel drive. This had it before anything else, and of course, it had twin sequential turbos. It was a very, very, very important car for its day. The only thing is that even with a $200,000 price tag, every single Porsche 959 that Porsche sold, it lost money on. So, how is that something that saved Porsche from bankruptcy? Well, when it was being developed in the early, well, it starts back to the late 70s, but it's late 70s, early 80s, they were not only trying to improve the aerodynamics, which is something that was new at the time, but they were also trying to win races. And Porsche is very famous for winning lots of races, including Le Mans winning 917K. Here are some decals. Little silhouette. I love these Tamiya decals with the silhouette and the name of the car right there. At some point, I want to make a little Fast and Furious car that has all these little silhouettes on the fenders with little lines through them. So, back to the story. We have Porsche winning all types of races, and well, again, every landscape changes at some point, and so the racing landscape was changing. Cars were getting faster, and so they needed to modernize to meet the needs of the growing demand. So one of the things that they wanted was not only something that could win Dakar, Paris Dakar Rally, things like that, which actually it won. I don't remember if it won. It was entered in there during its development stage. But one of the other things that was announced at the time of its development was Group B. Group B was a type of rally race that was almost like an unlimited class. You could have turbos, you could have all-wheel drive, you could have a lot of things going on. So what happened was Porsche said, we got to get involved in that, as well as a lot of other car manufacturers did. So Group B is a very interesting thing. You could not only have your own video on that, but you could have a series of videos on Group B. Ironically, Group B was phased out before this car and a lot of other cars that were developed for Group B ever materialized. So, what to do with a super advanced, high performance, super exotic car? Let's sell it for a loss. And even though they sold it for a loss, it was still a winner on the track. And it was a very, very, very influential car to come for years. Like I said, with its all-wheel drive system. I can't remember if this had all-wheel steering, but that was also being developed at the time with a lot of manufacturers. But this was also, when it was released, the fastest car on the planet. It had a sub 200 mile per hour top speed at 197, 198, which was pretty quick, especially for a factory Porsche. I think they beat the old factory Porsche by several, I want to say about 15, 20 miles. But one thing happened out of all this is that Porsche sold these in very low numbers. And because they were selling them in low numbers and because the development was so high, one thing they didn't want to do was test this for the United States for its strict crash testing and other development, for its other requirements for selling a car in the United States. So what happened was they decided, we're not gonna go through the process of certifying it for the United States, just to sell a few. Well, sell a few in the United States it actually did. Now, not officially, but most notably Bill Gates, as well as a few other people, decided that this was too important of a car for them to pass up. And so they went out, they got their Porsche 959s, and they weren't allowed to import them into the United States where they lived at the time. So what to do? Well, these individuals got together and they lobbied government for, I want to say, about 15 years until they were able to enact the show and display law. So what happened was is that nowadays you can get a car from another country that's very rare, that isn't certified for the United States. You can't sell in the United States, but as long as you drive it within a certain amount of mileage, I want to say it's like between 1,500 and 3,000 miles a year. As long as you do that, you can certify it, you can license it, and you can drive it on United States roads. However, with the mileage restriction, some people might not like it. But because it's a show and display, what that means is that it's too an important car to let go to not display it in museums, at car shows, maybe not at Cars and Coffee, but car shows, events like Watkins Glen or Concours d'Elegance in California, the Amelia Island and Florida, things like that. You want to have a car like this on the United States shores for these display purposes. And so Bill Gates, along with a few other people, they got the laws changed until they were able to have their car and drive it too. Anyway, that is the 959. I really didn't talk too much about the. Well, why not we do that? It's not very long. Not very long at all. Let's look at the glass. Now, the glass we saw first, and of course we pulled it out again first. It's very clear, very nice. Tomy has very good quality in their cars. Everything from the glass to the very realistic tires, and then of course the fit of the parts. So we've got nice thick pieces. Now this, of course, as it's molded, you see these lines form, and this is where the plastic eventually forms as it cools. But you have these thermal lines that develop in here. You can't feel it, but they are there. So it's always good to be careful when you're painting. Now this is on the outside, but you can see the as the plastic comes together and these injected mold lines that yeah, they need to be painted. I mean, you could put them together like this, but you're kind of doing a disservice to the subject. I mean, I'm not going to tell you what to do. Maybe you like the marbleized look of the plastic. Looks like Scale Auto Garage is out here. Thank you very much for showing up. 959 was one of my favorites back in the 80s. Love this kit, and I think I have built it 3 or 4 times over my lifetime. I think you have one on your channel that I saw too. Really like his channel. Please check him out. The body. This is again going over the review of the plastic. You know, you've got your mold. This isn't a mold line, but it's where the injection piece. But this is your mold line right here. You've got, if you can hear that, you've got a little little line that is part of the flash process that as it's cooling coming out of the molds, it forms these little lines. So you want to be very careful. You can mask it, but most people will just take a X-Acto knife if they're feeling lucky, and they'll start scribing it back. They might go over it with a Sharpie and highlight it, and then either go over it with a Sharpie and scribe it back, or even just sand it down. I like to take a small sandpaper and just kind of go over it myself. That way you don't burn in too much into the plastic, which you can ultimately see at some point. You've got nice details in the molding process. Tamiya has a very good quality reputation, and so you definitely get a quality kit when you get this. Revell has also released one of these. I want to say I saw one earlier from someone else. I know Fujimi has a like 1/16 scale kit. I don't count that in the 1/24th scale, but I do all sorts of scales. So there's that. But if you look at the aerodynamics on this is something that was really worked on by Porsche designers and developers. They really wanted to have this a slippery aerodynamic design, and this came in, I believe, at a 0.28 drag coefficient. So pretty good numbers, especially at the in the mid to early 80s. So during development, this was like I said, this is one of the most important cars ever made. Not only it changed laws, but it changed the landscape of supercars. As we know today, you aren't going to get a supercar, or very rarely you're not going to get a supercar that doesn't have all-wheel drive system. The system that Porsche developed is in its 911 road cars to this day. The PSK, I want to say it's Porsche Steuer couple system. Going back to the interior, this is something that's reminiscent. This is something that's so cliche 80s. You've got these stripes in the seats, and if you ever do any research on it, you'll see that the interior not only was gray, but it was this gray, almost like vinyl looking leather, very shiny look. And these stripes were actually different shades of gray. I think one is like a tannish gray, and one's like a greenish gray. So there you go. And very 911. I mean, this is based on 911. Almost underneath the skin, it was almost all 911, and so you're going to have a very familiar cabin when you get in it. So there it is. This is, like I said, one of the most important cars today, because like most cars that are on the road today, especially sports cars, even family cars like SUVs, they owe a lot of their technology to this. Oh, and one thing I left out, this car raised its ride height, which is something that you see more common today. It not just to clear fenders to go over speed bumps. This is actually made for endurance and rally racing. So they actually had several inches of clearance on these. You could actually get these lifted up, and you could go fast over rough terrain. So a very important car in the racing community, a very important car for Porsche, and a very important car for the world. So, and it's just a really nice looking car. Um, One of the things that we like to do when we appreciate cars is look at them. We like to think of the lines that they have. We like to think of the shapes. Pinstripe these cars. I have something in mind for this one, obviously. But what would you do with this? What color would you paint it? What would you paint it in a racing livery? Would you paint it for a solid color, or maybe a Fast and Furious design with wild graphics? Well, let me know in the comments. And thank you so much for coming. Y'all have a very good evening and enjoy. Excuse me. You all have a very good evening and enjoy the hobby. Thank you so much for watching.